Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald. And today we're going to take a little bit of a look at training camp as we know it this year, that is, for the Vikings, and check in with a couple of guys who've been making headlines, how that play may influence, the start of this regular season for the Vikings. And we'll take a little look at the depth chart as well. So obviously the depth chart in the middle of August typically doesn't mean a whole lot. There's a lot of changes that go on between, the time of recording this show and, when we get started on September 10th. So we're going to have some fun with the depth chart, take a look at some guys who could be risers, fallers, that type of thing. And that's the main game plan for the show. And then we're going to finish the whole thing up with our way too early predictions for the Vikings season. So their final record, we're going to predict that on, as of this recording, August 18th, which is, in my opinion, way too early. So we're going to show. So let's get it started here. Drew, why don't you give me some insight as to what has been going on that we know of, keeping in mind, of course, that there's not a whole lot of media at practice right now. There's not a whole lot of cameras out there to hand out, videos and samples. Basically, what we know is from the Vikings account and a couple of, very serious, high-profile insiders or guys who have been covering the team for a long time.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is Cameron Dantzler is getting a lot of hype. He's notably made a couple of big plays. I think the one that got attention on Monday was the long downfield deflection of a Thielen pass, or was covering Thielen and got covered downfield, knocked away a pass. Apparently picked off Kirk Cousins again today. And it just seems like he's flashing quite a bit, and it's not just like a once in a day type of thing. It's consistent play, matching up with Thielen and the top receivers on the Vikings. So that's the big one there. And it seems like Gladney, I think he's being limited because of injury, so he hasn't really gotten that opportunity yet to shine. Right. But it seems like right now it's Hill and Hill and Hughes are the top two, and the Dantzler is kind of the third guy who is outside in the nickel, with Hughes going inside as a slot. So that's what cornerback looks like right now, which is that's one of the key positions for any Mike Zimmer team, but especially this team that had so much overhaul over this offseason. Then the other couple things that I've just taken note of basically this is literally just me following certain accounts on Twitter. So obviously we're not there. We're not seeing any of this besides videos that may be posted. Dalvin Cook is being limited because it sounds like he and, the Vikings, Dalvin's agent, are really trying to get a deal done here soon before the season starts. Justin Jefferson said that the offense the Vikings are going to run is very similar to that of LSU. So it seems like that his acclimation to the league is going well and very smooth, according to his own thoughts there. And then I guess the last thing too, we'll get into the depth charts a little bit, specifically in the offensive line and defensive line. It looks like things are shaping up a little bit. Pat Elflein moving to right guard now is a little bit different than the past few years, so that's a big change to look at as well.
Excellent. All right, so let's start with Cameron Dantzler then, because you say that name, and that's really, from my vantage point, meaning what I've read on Twitter, the very few articles that I've read about this, what's going on, and the insight that we do have, just from the conventional, the traditional sources, I should say, it's just it's not their fault. It's just not as good as usual. It has nothing to do with their performance or anything like that. It's just a matter of there's just not that much access. So guys like Cameron Dantzler, I mean, you see 2-3 highlights of the guy, and I mean, he is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the 2 or 3 guys right now on the entire team, not just rookies, on the entire team who is, quote, flashing right now during training camp. Now, there's a couple of things here. First of all, we need to keep in mind that the Vikings are showing us what they want to, right?
Yeah.
When you're looking at the Vikings social media accounts, it's for hype, okay? This isn't, independent news source that's going to tell you who's playing poorly, right? They don't do that at the Vikings website. So keep that in mind. But the things that we have seen from Cameron Dantzler are really nice, right? He was one of the guys that we actually got to in our review of the 15 rookies that the Vikings brought in, or 15 plus rookies counting the undrafted guys. And things that we liked that were very notable and I think are flashing already on film are that length, first and foremost,
Yeah.
the ability to lay out and stretch to catch that ball over, well, not catch it, but deflect that ball over Thielen. That's a physical trait that can't be taught. And you got to love the awareness too, the ability to kind of, get to that point, to be in position to be there. Those are two things that are just, those are two really nice pieces and nice traits that you can build on. And it's good to see that flashing early, regardless if that has been, a consistent thing or just kind of what we've seen so far on social media and from, reporters.
Yeah, because I think the big quote was Adam Thielen going up to Zimmer and saying, yeah, 27 is going to be really good. And so it sounds like, based on that, we can draw a conclusion a little bit here that Thielen went up against Dantzler quite a few times during the day and didn't have an easy time, let's say, of getting open, whereas he may have had an easier time with other corners the past few years. So that's, something we can draw on, and it doesn't mean anything that he's going to be a star, season one in the NFL or anything like that. For sure, but he does. We talked about the length. We talked about how problematic that was for college receivers he went against, and it seems like that so far that aspect of things is transitioning well. And again, we talked about the weight, getting bigger. That still probably has to happen a little bit, but
right.
He has the length, the build, the size, and some of those traits, the physicality as well that Mike Zimmer has wanted in his cornerbacks, and so I think the next thing is to just mature that a little bit and, give it some true NFL game reps, which won't happen until the regular season. But that's, it's positive in that aspect. And we haven't seen anything from Gladney yet. So that'll be kind of a wild card there. But it's nice to know at least one of those guys seems to be, putting on a show early, which, you really can't. You can't be a solid contributor in the NFL without making some noise right away.
Absolutely.
In training camp.
So there's a couple of legs to this that are important, right? So not only is Cameron Dantzler a rookie, right? It'd be very nice to see a rookie step forward and make big plays and have a large contribution in his initial season in the NFL. That's all great, but let's keep in mind the facts too that he's a third-round pick, so a higher round pick, a guy who's likely drafted, considered to be a spot starter / potential starter / in some drafts, maybe, a potential Pro Bowler. You're not necessarily expecting superstar talent from the third round. You are expecting something, but, and it seems like you're already getting, quote, that something from Cameron Dantzler, that, that piece that makes him look like the part, right? So you're seeing early returns. That's really nice to see. The second piece here is just how important this cornerback position is for the Vikings. We've been yelling about it all season long. The defensive line has gotten weaker since, we initially were, concerned about the secondary. And that's only going to influence them in a more, negative way and require stronger results from the cornerback group. I mean, you just said who the two starters are. It rolled off the tongue so easily, but like Mike Hughes and Holton Hill are your two starters right now. That, I have confidence, I suppose, in the potential of both of those players, but it's definitely nice to see that you're getting contributions, at least in training camp. Again, I'm trying to find something meaningful here when you're talking about a training camp that doesn't involve any other teams, any preseason games, anything like that. It's still nice to see those traits show up when you desperately need those traits from your cornerback group. That just it's at the very least, it's a very young cornerback group, and that spells potential issues for just about any team. I don't care if you're Mike Zimmer or anyone. It's hard to coach a lot of young defensive backs into a position where they're contending for a division championship and the ability to go somewhere in the postseason. So to see early returns, if you will, from Cameron Dantzler is big, not just because of his status as a rookie, but also because the Vikings need this. The Vikings really need this from Cameron Dantzler.
Yeah. I think one of the things Tom Pelissero said on NFL Network today or yesterday was that part of the reason the Vikings were kind of stingy with trade offers for Anthony Harris, and they ultimately kept him, was so they could buy some time for these cornerbacks to develop a little bit, right? Because now you got a little bit of protection over the top. Some very good protection over the top. Anthony Harris is one of the best in football. But these corners, there's a little bit of room for error there, so to speak, with Harris there, that you can kind of guide these guys along a little bit. So that clearly they've been thinking about this, and this has been part of sort of the plan in building this team or rebuilding this team, is that, okay, this cornerback group will have to have, we'll live with some growing pains, in 2020, perhaps in 2021, to build this back up to, what Zimmer had this team at in 2016, 2017. So it seems like Dantzler is kind of the first step. What we're seeing here, again, we're trying not to fall too much into the hype here, but it seems like there's something to be positive about here. And I think that's good, because a lot of Vikings fans are very, like myself, were very uneasy about this position.
Absolutely. And then you consider the fact that, like you said before, Gladney hasn't been playing much. That just makes it that much more important for Dantzler to be, doing his part, and potentially even a little bit more than what we expect from him this season. So let's move on to Justin Jefferson then, who you did make note of. It was his quote, not someone else's quote, about his understanding of the offense and kind of his transition to the NFL. So that all sounds very good. And for what it's worth, confidence is also very important. You don't want to have a guy who says, "Oh, I don't think I can learn this." You'd prefer him to say, "Oh, I've seen all this before. I'm good," and be wrong about that. But it sounds like, at least from him, and I'm going to trust Justin Jefferson's perspective here, given that he knows what he's played before, right? So you should definitely be able to see consistencies at the NFL level. That's also a good sign too. Now, the one thing I will say about that is I was never concerned about the football intelligence of Justin Jefferson.
No.
Or his ability to adapt to an NFL team. That, to me, is we're checking a box as opposed to being excited about the progression of a player. That's what I thought I would get from Justin Jefferson. He'd immediately be able to understand the offense, adapt to new, maneuvers or motions or what have you. It was the press coverage and kind of pushing him off the line of scrimmage and his ability to release that was really the concern. So while this is good information, positive information to receive, how much really can we take away when we kind of expected this from the player?
Right. No, I get it. It's and plus the Vikings are doing that thing they do with rookies where, it's like they keep them below on the depth chart. They, because Laquan Treadwell never got his chance right away, and people are like, "Oh, that's why he never made it." But I think right now, what is it? BC is number 2, and Justin Jefferson's kind of that number 3 guy as of now. So that's what they do. That's how all these rookies are. Ezra Cleveland's not getting a shot. Dantzler is the 3 guy right now. He's rotating in the nickel as on the outside, and just happens to be making plays, and people are taking note of them. So I do expect Jefferson to, gradually work into a larger role. But right now it's BC is number 2. Jefferson seems to be the number 3 based on things I'm reading. And then kind of, you get Chad Beebe or Tajay Sharp working in there as well as the next guy in line at wide receiver. So and then you also, I should say this too, Alexander Hollins has made a couple of highlights as well and seems to be getting some praise from those following and reporting on camp too. So wide receiver group, not, clearly things are missing with Stephon Diggs not there, but Justin Jefferson appears to me acclimating well and efficiently as a first round rookie should. And the next step thing is just to see how it translates to real action, which we won't be able to see in preseason, which is going to hurt all these rookies.
Yep, and that's just that's the truth of it right there. Speaking of Stephon Diggs, by the way, the Bills are doing a hell of a job highlighting his highlights, if you will. And I've seen Vikings fans are absolutely loving that. So,
by the way, also Bills fans are going nuts over Josh Allen throwing passes against no defensive players to Stephon Diggs, which that's fun too.
Yep. All right, so let's go a little bit deeper into that depth chart that you've referenced a couple times here. Obviously, we know who the quarterback is, so we don't need to spend a whole lot of time there. But let's start with the wide receiver group, because I think there's one position on each side of the ball, wide receivers and cornerbacks, which will probably draw the most interest just based off of the fact that there was so much shuffle during the offseason at those positions. So let's start there.
Yeah. So one thing that there's a quote from Gary Kubiak here. He said, we're going to probably play 4 guys throughout the course of the game. So I look at all of them as starters. So keep in mind that number 4 seems to be sort of like that's going to be kind of okay. Here are the guys that are going to rotate in, get snaps during the game. As of right now, you got obviously Adam Thielen, you have BC Johnson, you have Justin Jefferson, and then it seems like there could be some sort of a competition, so to speak, between Tajay Sharp and Chad Beebe for that 4th spot. Right now, Alexander Hollins is mixing in there, and then KJ Osborne as well. It seems to be a roster, a solid, I wouldn't say a lock for a roster spot, but certainly a candidate because of that special teams ability he provides as well. So it seems like those 6 guys are sort of the front runners for wide receiver spots on the team. Dylan Mitchell also is the candidate, as well as Dan Shazina. I should know how to say that name as an undrafted free agent there. But those are the guys that seem to be getting attention at receiver. So nothing's terribly surprising there, though. I wouldn't wouldn't be like the Vikings to vault Jefferson to number 2 right away. Right. BC wasn't like bad by any means last year. He would have no, from his perspective, there's no reason for his job to be taken away for a rookie to take it based on what he did last year. So I don't see any concerns or anything, red flags or anything there. I would expect Tajay Sharp to emerge as that 4th guy in that rotation there. That's just my prediction, though, and just based on his experience in Tennessee and what BB has or has not done so far in his career.
Yeah, that seems fair because we've established that it's mid-August, so Chad Beebe's about 2 weeks overdue for an injury at this point, right? so Tajay Sharp probably slots in there at that number 4 spot. So Adam Thielen, obviously the number 1. It's the same deal as, we know who the number 1 running back's going to be, and we know who the number 1 quarterback's going to be. But looking down that depth chart is where it gets a little bit more interesting, right? You mentioned the BC Johnson, Justin Jefferson kind of scenario that we have going. If you want to call it a camp battle, I suppose, for that number 2 spot, you can. But I think what Gary Kubiak says does ring, pretty important here, that the Vikings are planning on, we'll see a snap share of probably, for Adam Thielen, and everyone else that remains in that group is probably only looking at, anywhere between 40 and 60% of the snap share, just so you can get 2, 3, 4 guys rotating in and out of the field there. So there's going to be a lot of movement, not just between now and September. It's 13th is the Packers game. There will be a lot of movement probably between September 13th and November 13th, if you will, because this group is going to be a constant work in progress beyond Adam Thielen. You've got one guy at the top that has solidified his status in the NFL, and then you've got probably 2 guys who have contributed in a meaningful way, and I say that very, very cautiously with Chad. It's not super meaningful experience for him. And then you've got a couple of rookies who, have star qualities or star traits, and then you've got KJ Osborne, right? That's basically your group here. And Alexander Hollins is a huge work in progress. I mean, I love the speed downfield and some of those nice things that he brings, but as far as being a skilled route runner or a guy that breaks press or, those fundamental aspects that are so key to being a starter in the NFL, I mean, he doesn't really have a shot this season, in my opinion, or at least not in the first 12 games of the year, probably. So the focus has to be, of course, on BC Johnson and Justin Jefferson and what the Vikings are going to do with them. And I'm with you that how many times have we seen this in the past, right? This is like it's the oldest thing in the book for Mike Zimmer. I don't care if you're a 1st-round pick or a 7th-round pick. You're starting low on the depth chart, and you might not dig your way out of there until November, December. And it has nothing to do with your skill or potential. It's like seniority almost. Like for example, if you work at a law firm and you're an associate, you don't just get promoted to partner because you are the best attorney. You need some time there too, right? And it seems like Mike Zimmer kind of operates the Vikings franchise as sort of like a firm. Justin Jefferson might be the most talented receiver on this roster. He might be. It's very possible. but there's no shot he's leapfrogging BC Johnson by week 1, I don't think. And that's only because BC Johnson has 1 year of experience and knows the play, and has, in theory, knows the playbook better than Jefferson.
Yeah.
And it's stand that way. My bet would be by maybe October, you'll start seeing a starting share of snaps for Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. And we can get to this too, to like on the offensive line as well. That's probably the offensive line and defensive line are probably the two depth charts we really want to cover the rest here, because everything else seems more or less solidified with who your starters are going to be, who's going to get time. But yeah, that's been a Zimmer thing since he started. It's been rookies are going to have to sort of earn their way to their spots, earn their playing time, and unless it's out of necessity, which BC Johnson would probably be a good example of that, where the Vikings receiver situation last year just simply called for a 7th rounder to step up and play a big role, and he did a solid job of that. So, but yeah, moving into, I wanted to get to offensive line because
let's do that.
There has been a little bit of a shift to where Pat Elflein has been playing left guard. He's actually played center and left guard in his career with the Vikings. Now he's going to play a third position, which with Elflein, it could be good, it could be bad. I don't think we really know right now. I know
it can't be much worse.
That's the thing is that it seems like his career has not panned out to what many Vikings fans expected or hoped for. Maybe the right guard position is the one that'll do it for him. So he looks like the favorite to be at right guard, sort of ahead of Drew Samia there, which a lot of people thought Drew Samia would kind of be that starting right guard there. And so what's happening then is Dakota Dozier and Aviant Collins are sort of rotating with each other at left guard on the first team. And then what you have is Ezra Cleveland as the second team left guard. So there's another example of the rookies you're not being given the benefit of the doubt. It's earn your keep, earn your spot on this team. And so Ezra Cleveland, a second rounder who clearly has promise, he has promise as a tackle, being moved to guard, which is probably another discussion to have too. But that's the situation now. And of course you have Bradbury at center, Riley Reif at left tackle, Brian O'Neill at right tackle. The second team at left tackle is Rashad Hill. So they're putting Rashad Hill at left tackle as the number 2 left tackle instead of Cleveland, which is interesting. Brett Jones at center on the second team, Samia right guard, Oli Udo at the right tackle on the second team. So interesting that shift there for Ezra Cleveland to go to guard and keep Rashad Hill as your number 2 tackle. But what do you think of that? Those shifts, that lineup there at offensive line?
It all makes me very nervous, to put it simply. And I think a lot of the people listening to this show probably hear that and feel the same way that I do. I mean, you've got one very stable piece in Brian O'Neill. You've got Riley Reif, who I think it's fair to say we should all feel comfortable with him. He played better than I feel like we remember the bad more than the good with Reif. Like there
he's
were
better
6 weeks
than his perception, I think.
I think so
the perception that Pete fans have. I think he's better than it's. I mean, being an above average left tackle is like that's what he is. I think he's an above average left tackle. But like it's a position where when you do something bad, it's very much under the microscope. Whereas, if your name is not called, it's a good thing. And I think that happens more than we kind of think it does.
Yeah. I agree. So you've got 2 nice pieces there. Then you've got Bradbury, who was a true roller coaster last year. And I mean, you hope he makes that second-year jump like so many have in the past, but there's no certainty there. Dakota Dozier, I know very little about, just to be straight honest with you. And that concerns me in itself because I feel like I have a pretty solid working knowledge of most guys that come through the Viking system, right? So that in itself makes me nervous. And then Elflein switching to his third position in as many years. You're right. Like, it can't be much worse. But at the same time, like, maybe a little continuity could be good for his career. He's not going to get that here. So that's something a little bit questionable, right? Couple things that I do like that you said, that Aviante Collins is finally playing guard. If you remember when he was the undrafted free agent at TCU, the Vikings had him at tackle initially, which worked in college, right? But he's not tackle big. So it's good that he's finally playing a position that I think fits his body type, in my opinion. And it's nice to see that Drew Samia is getting some love as well. Although I do think, I'm with you. I think that Samia has more potential and more promise than Dozier, so it's a little bit interesting, I suppose, that he isn't in that starting spot opposite Pat Elflein, wherever you want to put Pat Elflein. In my opinion, it seems to make more sense to just move Samia into a starting role at left guard and keep Pat Elflein for a second season at right guard, and hopefully you get that results as a result of him playing the same position for 2 years in a row for the first time in his career, and also finally, about a year removed from his major injury.
Yeah.
So a lot of concerns, a lot of question marks, and to be honest with you, the backups don't excite me either. I mean, Rashad Hill, I know what he can do now. There was a moment for about 4 weeks, 2 years ago, we were like, oh, Rashad Hill, this guy could really do it, maybe. He looked awesome in spot starter duty, right? It's not like that anymore. I've seen enough of Rashad Hill to know that he is a very, very solid swing tackle in the NFL and not someone that I'd be confident in if, for example, Riley Reef begins to falter. So I find it a little bit questionable that Ezra Cleveland isn't even getting snaps at offensive tackle, because Ali Udoh has, I believe about 4 years of football experience in his life, something like that. I believe he's the one that he didn't even play football until he was older in his life, and he's still a very young player. So that concerns me also. Across the board,
Yeah.
It concerns me greatly. But I knew that coming into this discussion. I didn't need to see a depth chart for that concern to be there.
That's the point I was going to make, is any way you order this depth chart, it's going to concern you, just because that's how Vikings offensive line teams, units have been for the last few years. So, but that's the offensive line right now. There's, it's going to be a concern until further notice, is kind of the perspective I have, and I'm going to roll with until further notice. All right, defensive line is the next one I really wanted to hit on, because we talked about cornerback a little bit with Dantzler.
Yep.
We know the linebacker situation is, Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, Eric Wilson, Ben Gideon, and then of course Troy Dye is getting the rookie treatment. So, but at defensive line, so Michael Pierce opting out definitely kind of threw those plans out the wayside. So one thing I've noticed looking at Twitter and stuff again is it seems like the coaches over and over keep praising Shamar Stephen. Mike Zimmer has made multiple comments. Andre Patterson has made multiple comments about how good this guy is. Vikings fans seem to be a little confused by those comments, but regardless, he is the new nose tackle for the Minnesota Vikings. He's been the guy, first team nose tackle, and Jaleel Johnson has been the starting 3 technique. So Jaleel Johnson, Shamar Stephen is currently our interior defensive line duo starting for the Minnesota Vikings. And the second team duo is Hercules Mataafa and Armin Watts. Armin Watts, the nose tackle there. So, we talked about these names before, as all the names that are there at that defensive tackle spot for the Vikings. That's how it's ordered right now. And of course, James Lynch, a rookie, would never get even second team reps right away. So he's the third team defensive tackle there. And one thing to note too, Jalen Holmes is actually moved back to defensive end. And so I think last year he got a lot of work at 3 tech. Mm-hmm. He is now, so actually Daniil Hunter's reps are also being limited, and so Holmes is kind of taking some of those reps as the first team DN opposite Ifadio Denebo. So that's how things are shaking up on the defensive line. And of course, some of those younger guys are kind of rounding out the depth chart. So Eddie Yarbrough, Anthony Zettel, DJ Wanham, and Kenny Willekes as well at defensive end. So those guys are towards the third team, but that's how that the interior there is kind of the most important part of this, and the reason that we're focusing so much on it. So the first team, Shamar Stephen and Jaleel Johnson. Second team, Hercules Mataafa and Armin Watts.
So before we jump back into the interior, because I do think you're right that that's really the focus here, getting that straightened out. We still got Daniil Hunter on the left side of the defensive line, right? So that's something. I suppose a little bit noteworthy, the fact that he didn't transition over to the right side with Jefferson Griffin officially signing with the Dallas Cowboys.
It is worth noting Hunter did travel a little bit last year. He was no like Khalil Mack going all over the place, but he did he did travel to both sides a little bit. Majority on that left side though.
And so that's interesting. That he remains kind of fixated on that side, and that means, of course, that Ifedi Odenigbo will be on the right side primarily. Kenny Willekes playing defensive end is interesting. I thought he slotted more in as a 3 technique at the NFL, coming from, I believe, a 3-4 system, if I'm remembering right. So that's something to keep an eye on, too, with him. And then DJ Wanham, who I gave absolutely zero chance to have success in the NFL. I will continue to keep an eye on him. To see if we see the leap that I guess some are expecting. But with that interior, right? So Jaleel Johnson and Shamar Stephen, at least to start, is kind of as expected, right?
Yeah.
Those were the 2 guys that we highlighted, of course. Shamar Stephen has the most experience within that entire group at, 7 years or something like that? And then Jaleel Johnson has entering his 4th year now. Those 2 players have seniority, and of course, as we've mentioned multiple times throughout the show, that's kind of what's going to start training camp off is seniority. Those 2 guys that have the most experience until someone proves them wrong. Now, Mata'afa, Watts, and Lynch are 3 guys that could theoretically make things interesting, given a couple of things. First of all 3 of those players have flash potential at some point, right? Mata'afa kind of being the most interesting, moving all over the place from defensive line, basically, to like safety linebacker almost, like something, right? And Watts flashed in about 14 snaps last year. He had about 8 really good plays. So, small sample sizes, of course, but interesting players nonetheless. And then James Lynch, of course, we've said multiple times, over the last couple episodes that 3 technique with some very real potential to be a solid rusher from the interior. So those are 3 guys that could make it interesting. But I think it's pretty fair to say that the 2 guys that we're looking at, Johnson and Stephen, are going to get the majority share when we open this camp week 1, right? Or excuse me, when we open this thing week 1. Because those 2 players, of course, have the experience, but they also know what's going on in the playbook, right? Johnson hasn't been as much of a stud as I think a lot of us have hoped in the first 3 years of his career. And Shamar Stephen is the most bland, like average, neutral nose tackle I've ever seen in my life. So these 2 guys are easily jumpable, of course, by the 3 remaining guys, but we need to see some flash from all 3 of them, basically, to warrant a higher snap count. Now, The one thing I will note before moving forward here is just that you keep in mind, too, that even if Johnson and Stephen are the 2 starters, their percentage of the snap share could be like 55% because nose and 3 tech are just inherently rotated a ton.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're Linval Joseph or James Lynch. Like, you're probably playing a significantly lesser share of the snaps than you would if you were even a defensive end, right? So something to keep in mind there as well. But is there, of those 3 guys, Watts, Mata'afa, Lynch, is there one that you think could make a significant stride, enough so that, say, by week 4, they're playing up there with the same amount of snaps as Stephen and Johnson?
I think Mata'afa has that potential just because he has that explosiveness as an athlete. He played linebacker, and he started 2019 as he was rotated in quite a bit actually as an interior pass rusher, and I think he could be sort of the next guy up there to. Maybe he won't be a starter, but I think in pass rushing packages, so to speak, he would be a guy that you could put in the middle there to wreak some havoc. So that's the guy out of those 3. But again, we're not watching what's actually happening in training camp. We're seeing a very small amount of things. So week 1, we'll get to see some real snaps, see what the lineups shake out to be. And I just, from what I know about Mata'afa and the background, the fact, he's basically gained like 50 pounds just to be a 3 tech over this past offseason. So that is exciting. It's not, it's sort of one of those high ceiling, low floor type things. Like it could work out really, really well, but at the same time, like you can't, learning a whole new position like that, in the short amount of time he's done it, can go poorly. So, but that's the defensive tackle or / interior defensive line position. Otherwise, other spots on the depth chart are as expected. We talked about corner, safeties, of course, Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris. It does seem like Josh Metellus seems to be getting some possibility there as the third safety, which whether you like it or not, I guess.
Mr. All over again.
So, but yeah, I mean, that's the early look at the training camp depth chart that none of us can even actually watch in person. So there you go.
Okay. Yeah. This is by far the weirdest offseason I've ever seen in my life. And I think it probably will that statement will stand for many years. So given the lack of knowledge that we have, of course we have to make a prediction, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's how football content works, right? It has to be meaningless, it has to be mindless, and it has to be entertaining in some way, right? So let's do our predictions here for the Vikings schedule, knowing that there are a few teams that have opted out of having fans. There are a few teams that have opted into having a percentage of fans. The Vikings have not made any headlines in that regard, so we don't know an answer to that. And same could be said about the first couple teams on the Vikings schedule as well. So again, we are working with quite literally nothing against the pandemic, which again I know nothing about other than wear a mask. So considering this schedule, on regular terms, you've got the Packers at home, heading to the Colts on the road, Titans at home, Texans on the road, Seahawks on the road, Falcons at home, Packers on the road, Lions at home, Bears on the road, Cowboys at home, Panthers at home, Jaguars at home, Buccaneers on the road, Bears at home, and then you finish on the road with the Saints and the Lions. What is your perception? What does this team sound like to you?
So the one thing that I've taken note of, and the one thing that scares me about this schedule the most is the quarterback play the Vikings will play against this year. As of now, injuries can happen and change all of this, but it far exceeds what they played against last year and had to deal with last year. So, I mean, off the top of my head, they played like David Blau, They played Matt Moore and lost.
Yep.
So who they play from the Broncos? What was his name? Brandon Allen. Like these are guys that are max backup quarterbacks in the league. That's their potential. And you look through the schedule of who they're going to play. I mean, of course, Aaron Rodgers twice, Matthew Stafford twice, pending injury. Phillip Rivers is now in Indianapolis, which Vikings can handle with Phillip Rivers. Ryan Tannehill was exceptional last year. Deshaun Watson was exceptional last year. Russell Wilson, of course. Matt Ryan, of course. And then you keep going down again. Rodgers again. Then you have Stafford week 9. The Bears game, that could be like their first break of the season, really, at quarterback, whether it's Nick Foles or Trubisky. Week 11, you get Dak Prescott, who just torched them last season, and they happened to sneak away with a win. You get Teddy Bridgewater. And they get the Jags, which Gardner Minshew. That's another one of their weaker links. It's probably one or two or three at this point of guys you can say, okay, the Vikings could handle this quarterback. Tom Brady, week 14. The Bears again, week 15. Then you got, of course, Drew Brees, week 16, which Vikings have handled Drew Brees before, but then you got Matt Stafford. So a lot of elite quarterback play is on the Vikings schedule, which it's not that I don't trust Zimmer to handle elite quarterbacks or some really good quarterbacks. Clearly he can do it and has shown it in the past, but it's like, I'm going to trust any defense to handle Brandon Allen and David Blau over some of the guys on this schedule here. So that's the one thing that does concern me that I think is a big difference from last year.
Okay. So I agree with everything you said. The Vikings are facing, and we could boil it down to one simple fact. The Vikings are facing better quarterbacks than they did last year. And pretty much all of them make me nervous. Every single one of those guys that you just listed. I mean, you listed, 4 former MVPs and 3 guys who have been in the discussion, right?
Something and like that. Rodgers, Brees, Brady. You got Deshaun Watson, who was in the discussion for a time last year. Russell Wilson, of course. Matt Ryan's been an MVP. And Matthew Stafford.
3 MVPs and 4 other guys who have been in the discussion. And then, by the way, this is weird. I just put this together in my head. The Vikings are facing every single quarterback in NFL history this year that has thrown for 5,000 yards, except for Peyton Manning, who's retired.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So Matthew Stafford, Drew Brees, and Tom Brady. Interesting, right? That's a fun little fact for you. Okay, so we boiled it down to the Vikings are playing against some good teams, or at the very least, very good quarterbacks. I don't know how great of an actual team the Texans are, or how great of an actual team the Panthers are pretty solid. Um, the Buccaneers, of course, with Tom Brady, that kind of sends them from above that
Yeah.
8-8 mark, just in theory. So, okay,
What
what we can boil
should
it down
we
to.
do this? Should we do this game by game here? We just
Yeah,
quickly kind of say, okay, win loss, quick explanation why, and then we'll see what we come up with for a final record.
let's do it. Okay, so starting with the Packers at home on September 13th, who you got?
In this matchup for the last few years, I've taken the home team regardless. I'll keep doing that. Vikings, for what it's worth, are 3.5-point favorites.
Okay. Yep, I'm also going to take the Packers. So that moves us to the Colts on the road against Phillip Rivers. Who we got in that one?
I think I have the Vikings. I'm basing this solely off of how the Vikings defense did last year against Phillip Rivers. That was kind of fun.
Yep, I'm going to also take the Vikings. I think that Phillip Rivers chokes down the stretch because that's what he does against any team that's a kind of above average. So the next one is the Titans at home. This is kind of a swing game, I feel like.
Yeah, I'm a big Titans guy. I think that's well documented.
Yep.
So I'm going to take the Titans. I'm not like super confident in that pick, but I'm still vibing off of their playoff run, and I think Tannehill is actually that good based on what he did last season. So I'll pick Tennessee.
So if I knew that U.S. Bank was going to be stacked with people, I would say the Vikings have the edge in this game. But because I don't think that knowing Wilfs, knowing Minnesota, I don't think there's going to be any fans. So I'm going to take the Titans as well. So that would put us at 2-1 heading into Game 4 on the road against the Texans.
On the road against the Texans.
I feel like they have fans too.
I was going to say, this is Texas. They're going to have fans there. But like that roster, what Bill O'Brien has done to that team, man.
David Johnson and Sean Watson is who you have to defend. No wide receivers.
Right. You got Will Fuller who can run a 9 route. I think Brandon Cooks is there too, actually, which is, now you just have guys that can run 90 yards downfield and Watson. I'm gonna pick Houston. I am. I really think Watson is an elite player. So I'm gonna bank on Watson sort of carrying Houston to the win here.
Okay, I'm gonna take the Vikings here with skepticism. So I have the Vikings at 3-1, but I could easily see them being 2-2 at this point as well. I understand the perspective is what I'm saying. On the road against Seattle is your next one. Always a tough place to play, but keeping in mind, of course, that Washington, I feel like, is one of the more likely states to not have fans.
Right. That's true, actually. That's a big deal with Seattle. I'm going to pick Seattle because I'm jaded at this point. Every Vikings game in prime time at Seattle just doesn't go well. So I'm picking Seattle there.
I'm going to pick Seattle too, and strictly because of Russell Wilson. I think that ultimately, if there's no fans, I'm going to take the betting team. The team you should bet on should be the team with the better quarterback, and Russell Wilson is light years better than Kirk Cousins. So the next one makes that same kind of way of analyzing the matchup interesting because you got Matt Ryan coming to town against Minnesota, who, of course, like you said, former MVP, really good player, but has Kirk Cousins eclipsed him if you're going to use that model for whether or not the Vikings are going to win. And you also have to keep in mind that the Vikings always embarrass the Falcons for some reason.
Right.
Since that kick, that Gary Anderson missed kick, the Vikings just consistently embarrass the Falcons for no reason. There's no explanation for it. They always come in with a pretty solid team, but that's what happens.
Right. I guess the one thing you could throw in there is the Michael Vick overtime walk-off run. Since that, Vikings have owned the Falcons. And, I'm taking Mike Zimmer has dominated Matt Ryan since he took over, just dominated him. So I am picking the Vikings here until I am proven wrong. And that statistic is proven to be faulty because Mike Zimmer owns Matt Ryan.
Yep, I agree. I will go with the Falcons at which pushes us in my head to 4-2.
I'm 3-3, I think.
3-3 for you. Packers on the road is the next one. I think we've kind of already analyzed this matchup, and now we're heading on the road. So is that the difference maker for you?
Yes, it is. I'm going to pick Green Bay, and I do think Wisconsin may allow fans there, and which is going to suck, by the way. I've talked about this before. I've vented about this much, but the fact that Week 1 Vikings does not appear to will be having fans. Now, there's no official word on that, but does not appear we'll be having any fans. Very good chance Packers have fans in their stadium for that game. with the Vikings. So I don't like the disadvantage of that with this rivalry. But
Yep. I'm going to do the same thing. I'll say Packers win, which pushes me to 4-3 and you to 3-4. Thankfully, the Lions are up next at home. I feel pretty comfortable taking the Vikings in that one.
Yeah.
So that moves you back to 500, and then we head to on the road against the Bears at Soldier Field, where I love the statistic. I'm going to continue to use it. They've won once since the Bush administration with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback at Soldier Field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Case Keenum that one year. That was like a fluky game altogether. The Trubisky rookie year where he.
Oh, right. You're right.
Trubisky threw like 2 touchdowns off of Vikings players, I think, that game or something. So I'm gonna pick the Vikings. I don't love it. I don't at all. But I'm gonna pick the Vikings just because at some point the Bears having a crappy quarterback, it's gonna come back to bite them, right? Against Mike Zimmer.
Yeah.
Like at the last how many years they've won solely on defense against the Vikings, and I'm basically banking on Kirk Cousins and the Vikings to put up like 17 points.
Yeah, I'm gonna do the opposite. I'm gonna bank on that not happening and take the Bears just because Soldier Field. So
fair.
That pushes us both up to 5 wins now, I believe. So we head into the Cowboys matchup at 5-4, playing at home.
This is in Minneapolis, right?
Yep.
Yeah. God, that Cowboys roster is so good. But you have to keep in mind Mike McCarthy's going to find a way to mismanage that clock and give this one to the Vikings. So I will pick the Vikings.
I'll take the Vikings in that one too. They got a lot of really good players. They don't have like a ton of like game-changing players. Like Dak Prescott, like really good quarterback, but the Vikings found a way to beat him even at his best last.
There's a ton of like very above average players, like a ton of those. And I wouldn't say that there's anywhere between there and like star, but there's no superstars.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one is against Teddy Bridgewater here. That's also in Minneapolis. So with the Vikings at 6 wins, and I believe in both of our lists here, they get Teddy Bridgewater, who, of course, the Vikings get this game, right? Of course. How does this one pan out?
Yeah, I hate to pick against Teddy. I do think the Panthers are going to be a lot better than people think though this year. I think that offense has some serious weapons on it. And they had to deal with, what was his name, Kyle Allen last year playing quarterback. So I think they'll be a lot better. But I'll take the Vikings at home just because we don't know quite enough about that team yet.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Vikings as well for the same reason. Teddy Bridgewater looked really good with the Saints. Let's see if he can do the same thing with a much less, like a still talented offensive roster, but not nearly what he was working with the Saints. That's 7 wins now. Heading to Jacksonville. This is at home again.
Yeah, I'm picking Minnesota at home against the Jags. Sorry. Until the Jags turn into a respectable franchise, that's what I'll be doing. Yep.
I say this. Same thing. I mean, like you pointed out when we started this discussion, Gardner Minshew, like solid quarterback, but he's still one of the weaker ones that the Vikings will face. I figure that their offense can get enough done, and the defense can do well enough to stop a kind of a subpar quarterback, or maybe second-year quarterback is honestly the fairest description for him. Just because he's shown flashes of talent, but I don't think he could beat Mike Zimmer just yet. So that's 8 wins now. Yeah. And then we get a little bit tougher here. Heading down to Tampa Bay against Tom Brady, probably, and it's Florida, so there's going to be the entire stadium's going to be packed.
Right. I'm going to pick Tampa Bay here. I mean, I think it's being slept on a little bit that Tampa Bay also has Gronk. Like, you have, now I don't think Brady now is the best quarterback in the league, but he's the most accomplished quarterback ever. You have Mike Evans and Godwin, who arguably last year the best duo at receiver.
Yep.
Then you add Rob Gronkowski, whether or not he's in his peak form, is yet to be determined, but still a very good receiving tight end. That's quite the array of weapons there for Tom Brady to use. So that offense could be lethal with Bruce Arians calling the shots.
Yep. And I agree with everything you're saying. I'm going to take the Bucs as well, which moves us to the Bears at home. We've had this discussion already. But for me, the home game in Minnesota makes a huge difference just for spiritual purposes, like the fact that they're not playing at Soldier Field. So Win for me now as
Yeah.
opposed to being lost on the road.
I will pick the Vikings at home too. Again, it's mostly because it's Trubisky or Nick Foles, which I know what Nick Foles did to the Vikings a couple years ago, but that he has not been. He's a very, very, very mediocre quarterback in the regular season.
I agree. So 9 wins for the both of us. These final 2 games here, you got the Lions on the road in Week 17, which I think we're both can agree it's going to push the Vikings to 10 wins in our perception.
Yeah.
So we got to focus on that Week 16 game on the road in New Orleans. That's kind of a swing game, and to me, really, you've got a couple swing games here, and that's the Saints, and then of course, your division games. Those really could be the difference between an 8-8 season and an 11-5 season. And for my money, I'm not betting on the Vikings winning in New Orleans after the last couple of years of. Let's just be real here. The Vikings got pretty lucky. A lot of things had to fall the right way for them to win both of those, those playoff matches against New Orleans.
Yeah. I mean, the Vikings can clearly do it, right? I'm not going to bet on it twice in a row, winning at the Superdome. I'm just not. So I'll pick the Saints there, which brings my record to 10-6, I believe. So that's actually better than I thought it would be going in. So I like that. But I don't know. It seems like with these like 2015 and 2017, both years, it seemed like were years where you kind of expected the team to sort of be middle of the pack or worse, and then that's when when Zimmer has his team firing on all cylinders out of nowhere and things shape up for better than you expected. So maybe that happens. I don't know. That 10-6, I guess, is my record prediction. That's better than I anticipated.
Yeah, I've got 10-6 as well. And had we not walked through the entire schedule, I think I would have said 9-7. So that's better than I assumed as well. So feel free to let us know your thoughts on the Vikings schedule and your way too early predictions in the comments section below on Daily Norseman or on our Twitter accounts if you want to do that as well. But that's all we've got for this week's show. Thank you as always for tuning in. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, etc. You can watch us on YouTube if you want with the 4 other people that do so. And next week, or the next time we record a show, I should say, it's probably more accurate, we'll be discussing kind of our preseason, way too early, expectations for the entire team. So we'll go through individuals for the Vikings, get into more specific numbers and analyze, kind of what this new roster can do from a statistical standpoint and how they're going to get to that 10-6 mark, which we just so boldly predicted. So that's the game plan for the future. We hope to catch you guys next time. And as always, thanks for tuning in. And we'll catch you guys next week.